magnified and exalted, raised and honored, uplifted and allowed to be beyond any blessing, song, praise, and constant on page 586. So this week's Torah portion is, Leviticus is really about the priests, okay? Not necessarily the average Israelite, but it's primarily about the priests, okay? And it talks about a priest not making himself unclean. I remember the term unclean really isn't the scripture, okay? Make themselves impure. Being unclean or impure does not have anything to do with sin. It has to do with being impure, not being able to enter into the temple or into the presence of God is the thing, you know. That's what it has to do. Even all the sacrifice and offerings that were given really weren't about sin. It was about purification, okay? And that's really what it's about. It talks about who a priest could marry or couldn't marry, who he could be unclean for but couldn't be unclean for. Use the term unclean because it's about all we have, and everybody understands that. But impure. The idea was purity, okay? And about even their family, you know, the family had to be within step with the father, with the grandfather. With the whole house needed to be following God in that way. You know, if they're going to be priests, they're going to have to do that. Daughters even were required not to do certain things. Now they could marry, even here. Now I know it talks about that. Even a male Cohen could marry another Israelite, but the stipulation was that they couldn't be divorced, they couldn't be a prostitute, they couldn't be a widow, but they needed to be a virgin of one of the tribes in Israel. Preferably, it was, you know, another Kohanim or Levite in that way. And then it talks about their grooming, you know. And we've talked about this before, that, you know, God wants us to, He wants us to dress our best when we come before Him. You know, we don't put on pajamas or bathrobe or holy jeans. I mean, talking about jeans with holes in them, shirts, or inappropriate shirts with things on them that shouldn't be, like skulls, and, bad words, stuff like that, right? Or that, yeah, pictures of drugs or whatever. But we should come as if because we are coming in the presence of God, in the presence of a king. You don't do that in front of a king, right? We want to be presentable, right? And so even the priests had to be presentable. Well, one of the things that it talks about is like the hair cutting. You know, groomed. And what does that mean? I know you've seen pictures of, you know, in encyclopedias and on the computer, internet, whatever, shows a high priest with a long beard. That's not true. Their beards were very close to their chin, because if they bent over, that's why the hoshin was tied so it didn't fall out away from them when they're leaning over to do their work. Of course, you know what a tie is like too. When you're wearing a tie, you just got the tie on and you're trying to do something, it keeps flopping in your way. Well, God didn't want that to happen either with the beard or with the Urim Viturim. He didn't want that to get blood on it. You know, not supposed to do that, you know, because that then presents you as, you know, blood. Then you get blood on everything, right? And then you're taking the blood and putting it on things that maybe it's not supposed to be, you know. And so they were to be kept short. Their hair was to be kept short, not long, okay? And that's the same thing, you know, so that those things didn't happen. Because if you got long hair and you're doing that and it flops, you know, in there, or the wind blows it in the way, even though they wore covers, wore a special hat. They did hair could usually would stick out. We've seen that people wearing hats and stuff, and their hair is long and sticks out. Well, that's probably what happened. But it makes one thing. It makes you look more presentable, you know, and more professional. Anyways, um, not against long hair. I'm just saying in this instance, this is what God wanted, and we should look our best when we come before Him, you know. And one of the things that we should be thinking about too is that in every day we should be walking every day as if we are in the presence of God, you know, because we are in reality, you know. And we should really think about that when we're doing things that maybe we're not supposed to be doing, you know. God is there. He sees everything. He knows everything. And we should be presentable every day. And, you know, that's one of the is in here that we do um, is the sovereignty of God. Where's that at again? Accepting the sovereignty of heaven, a person should always be God-fearing privately and publicly, right? Acknowledging the truth, right? That's what we should be doing. And we need to look at that. We need to see that they had to present themselves in a certain way. You know, God is holy. What does holy mean? It means He's set apart. It means He's sanctified, meaning He's um, more than just set apart. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Um, no, no, not those words. But He is the one that we who has set Himself apart for us. You know, yes, God is the Father of all living. He is we're all His children and stuff like that. But His real children are the ones who keep His commands and follow in His ways, right? Yeshua showed us the way to walk, and in Hebrew that's halakha, the way to walk. And so, you know, Yeshua did not depart from any of this. Okay, now He wasn't a priest here on earth. Okay, just so you know, He wasn't a priest on earth. He was a prophet and He was a rabbi, but He wasn't a priest here on earth. Now Hebrews, when we look at the book of Hebrews, it does talk about Him being a priest, but of the heavenly temple, not the earthly temple, because God already has a temple. Now that's what we read here in Ezekiel 44, is that in the Messianic era, God's going to set up His priests again at the temple. When Yeshua comes, He's going to gather His people from all the four corners of the world and bring them back to Israel, and they're going to rebuild the temple. And that temple will stand up until the end of the 1,000-year reign of Messiah. And it's in Jerusalem, Rome, not Minneapolis, not New York, but Jerusalem, okay? Or it's not in Red Lake either. I don't know. I've heard some people say that it's up in Red Lake, the lake itself, but I don't know. Yeah. It's invisible. We can't see it. Like the Lost City of Atlantis. Something like that, yeah. Anyways, but we're going to rebuild together, just like the Israelites helped in building the tabernacle, and then later on the temple in Jerusalem and stuff, and rebuilding the temple. This time we're going to help also in its rebuilding, okay? And once it's rebuilt, then the priesthood is going to be set up again. I mean, it's already, to be honest with you, it's going to get going. It already is set up. It still is. Even right now, they have schools for priests in Israel to learn how to do all these different offerings and all these different things that are going to be required to be done. They're ready. They're ready to go. You know, they even have what do you call them? Trailers. You know, with education trailers that go out to the community and have a fake altar and stuff like that and fake animals, but they show the people how they're supposed to do it. Because the thing is that when you bring an offering, you have to do the killing, so you got to know how to do it, right? You have to know. That includes the Passover lamb. You know, people don't realize that the priests were there to catch the blood. You know, there were only certain ones that they did. That was the ones for the people and for the tabernacle or the temple. Okay, Those are the ones they did. The ones you brought, you did yourself with the priest there to catch the blood and to take it where it needed to go, right? And so that's what that's all about. And even in the Messianic era, it says we're going to be bringing sacrifices. Um, in Ezekiel, Ezekiel refers to him as the prince. Why? Because God is the king, and he's the prince, even though he's the son of David and so forth. Thing is that he's referred to as the prince because it will be his responsibility to provide for the festivals, for the Sabbath, all the sacrifices for the nation in that sense. But we, in turn, will be able to bring our own offerings, just like it describes both here and in Ezekiel. It's, everybody says, but Yeshua took our sins away and stuff like that. We don't need to do that anymore. It has nothing to do with sin. I mean, it is part of sin. It's what causes us to be impure. The sacrifices were to make us pure so that we could draw close to God. That's what a korban is. It's a gift, but it's to draw close. It's to draw us close to God. And how do we do that? Purity. Not just on the outside, but on the inside too, And it's a tough walk in this world. There was a very good teaching put out by First was to Zion again. I can't think of his name now. Franzak. Jacob Franzak. Another one. Real good. If you can listen to those, they're really good. On replacement theology and stuff. And it's interesting. Christians, when they hear replacement theology, don't understand what it's about. They don't understand that not replaced Israel. Okay? They are when they accept Yeshua, they're accepting the covenant that goes with that, with Yeshua. Yeshua was Jewish. He was part of the Abrahamic covenant. They're accepting that covenant to the degree that, if they're a Gentile, they're not obligated to keep the whole Torah, but there are 7 laws, or even what James gave them, just 4 things to start out with, just the beginning, just to be able to enter table talk and teachings and stuff like that to get an understanding, so that not just that they could sit with the Jews, but that the Jews could sit with them, right? Stay away from the idolatry. Don't eat meat offered to idols, or sacrifice to idols, don't eat blood, don't eat anything strangled. A lot of people say, well, what's strangle have to do with it? Well, one, cause the blood to clot, but 2, probably the main thing is that strangulation is torture. And we're not to torture an animal. I see some of these videos sometimes of people making lobster and stuff, and they throw them in the pot head first alive. That's torture. I'm sorry. If you do that, that is a torture of an animal. That is wrong.
So is eating lobster.
And so is eating lobster, yeah. But I'm just saying that people that do that, they don't understand that that's cruelty, and we're not supposed to do that.
They do it head first so you can't hear them scream.
Right, I know they do it head first so you can't hear them scream. See, it's torture, I didn't understand that until, I really didn't understand that until I was watching these videos. I kind of like to watch some of this stuff, making different types of food and stuff like that, and I realized how torturous that is, how cruel that is, and how against the Torah that is. Not just because it's unclean, or not a clean animal, but that is torture. We're not supposed to do that. And there's other things too that other cultures have that. Like I think it's in India where they will bring a live monkey to the table and put a thing around its head, and then you got to take your hammer and kill it, and then eat its brain. That's torture. That's cruelty. Yeah, I know. I don't know if they still do it, but I know that they've showed it in historical movies and stuff like that, or the Temple of Doom, they show that exact thing. And I did see a video also where they were doing that. I couldn't watch it. I was like, how can anybody do that? Um, that's, and that's why God warns us about, He's very into not being cruel to animals. That's why He even gives us an order that you're not to kill a mother or offer up a mother, or when a calf or kid or lamb is born, they need to stay with his mother for 7 days. Then on the 8th day afterwards, 8 days, which is new beginnings, right? Then they can be offered up, but not on the same day or in front of each other or anything like that. That's why God also tells us that when we're collecting eggs, we don't, we shoot the mother away when we collect the eggs, right? Um, and the reason for that is because it's cruel otherwise. We need to shoo them away. Uh, Memories for the most part. Elephants don't though, but we don't eat elephants. So, but you know, um, it's the idea of uh, not being cruel. And that includes even when God is telling them when they're uh, surrounding a city and stuff that they're not to kill the fruit trees, right? Don't chop down the fruit trees and make yourself take another tree that doesn't produce fruit that you don't eat. Use that, right? Why? Because that's food for one thing, and it's something that's usable in that sense. The other stuff is good for making implements of war and stuff like that if you need to, right? So we see that. We have that. So God in His divine uh, wisdom and stuff is giving this stuff to us. Why? Is to set us apart. Including when they even today when at a lot of meat places that do the butchering and stuff, they use a horrible thing to kill them. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like almost like a gun or whatever, but put up to the head and it shoots in the head. Huh?
They call it a knocker.
A knocker? Okay.
Stuns them.
It stuns them, but they're still alive. Right? Yeah, but they're still alive, and that's cruelty. That's why and when you do a kosher butchering, a shochet is what they're called. They're ritual butcher. They know how to do it correctly to keep the animal from suffering. And it's usually a nice, long, very sharp knife. And they cut from jugular to jugular in one move, one quick move. No hesitation. No, if you do, it's considered not kosher. It might be a kosher because you can't suffer. It's no good. You can't even. It's the same thing with bringing it in the offering. When you did it, because you had to do it. You remember, you brought an offering. You get to kill it. You had to make sure you knew how to do it, and do it in one quick movement. Because the knife is so sharp, they don't really realize that they've been cut, and so they don't kick around and flop around and stuff like that, because they bleed out so quick. There's nothing there. And also in a kosher meat market too, where they do the butchering, before they bring the next animal in, they clean everything up. There's no blood or anything, so that there's no smell of death. Bring the next one in, do it again. That's how they do it, which is more humane. Although now you've got groups out there calling for an end to kosher killing. Well, only because they are ignorant of the truth. The other day here in Bemidji, what day was that? Was that Thursday? I think it was Thursday. There was some guys up here at Walmart, across from Walmart, around the corner there and stuff. I don't know, several of them. I don't know how many there was. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. All dressed in white, long beards, white cowboy hats or some type of white hat, and holding up signs against circumcision. And some of the signs were really filthy.
The one picture that I saw, and the guy had blood on the front of his pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't have time to stop or anything. I was working. I was on my way to a meeting, so I couldn't stop. But I did go back there afterwards, see if they're still there. But at noon, they must have left because there was nobody there. But I mean, some of their signs were pretty filthy, pretty stupid.
Like filthy as maybe had gross stuff on it?
Not just they're saying great gross words, inappropriate words.
Saw that
No.
last night.
Crude, rude, obnoxious, yeah, whatever you want to call them. Bad words, bad sayings. So, and so there is that movement there. I don't know who they were. Have no idea. Um, yeah.
They were someplace, was it Fargo or someplace first?
Oh,
I mean,
I don't know.
they're going around the country anyway.
Are they? Yeah, I have no idea.
The whole movement there
Yeah.
across the nation.
Yeah. Calling it male mutilation.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. What about the female mutilation? That's something that's not biblical and not. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, anyways, but God, it's called the priests, set them apart even from the rest of Israel. Okay. And so when we look at this, he has guidelines for how they are to perform their duty. Just like we've been talking about, that God has uh, how he wants to be worshipped, a set of, this is how he wants to be worshipped. Now he has the priests doing this thing, the Levites doing this, and then the Israelites doing something different, right? Even the foreigner can be a part of some of that, okay? They can bring offerings that they can't bring them in. They can't do it in the temple, but they can bring it in and have it done for them. And so they have to follow these rules of what kind of animal, how it is to be presentable and stuff like that, But God didn't cut them off. He didn't cut them out. He made a way for them to be able to do that. But even their general Israelite couldn't necessarily go past or beyond a certain part of the tabernacle or the temple. Only the Levites could do it. And then even there, the Levites there's places where the Levites couldn't go, only the priests could go. So it's a separation there. And when we take a look at the Shlichim, the apostles, they wrote a book called, we shortened it, call it Didache, but it's all about how the Gentiles were to live in the community, just basic. And one of the big things is for the Gentile to learn the Torah and keep as much as they can, keep as much as they can, because they're not obligated like Israel is to the Torah. And I hear a lot of people saying, we hear that, we've heard it before, that the Torah's done away with, Yeshua did away with it, all these different things, which are, just say it right here, is that if Yeshua did away with any of the Torah or changed anything in there, he's not the Messiah. We missed him if he did. Came to fulfill, but not to end, right? And in Judaism, when it says fulfill, in Judaism it's called a Hebrewism. And the rabbis taught and the sages taught before even Yeshua was here in the world with us, that if you taught the Torah incorrectly, then you did away with it. But if you taught the Torah correctly, then you fulfilled its meaning. That's what it means. It has nothing to do with being ending or anything like that. And that's what Yeshua was using. He was a rabbi. He used rabbinic terms, including the one where he says, I am the truth, the way, and the life. I come to the Father except by me. That's a rabbinic saying. A lot of your famous sages and rabbis would say that to their disciples, to their own disciples, because they are, in a sense, a pillar. They are the one that they are supposed to be looked up to, They have to demonstrate pure living and stuff like that, That was their job. And so that was a saying that they had. Of course, Yeshua's saying is, when he said it, it has much more meaning than what theirs is, because he truly is the way, the truth, and the life, right? We know that. So, but as we go, as we think about this stuff, especially my boys, dressing up, probably isn't a big thing for them. But for Sabbath, for festivals, we should come dressed in our best or what we can afford to be our best. It doesn't have to be go out and get something expensive that you can't afford or anything like that, but something nice, presentable, right? My girls tend to dress up really, really nice and stuff. But
You could wear a t-shirt that's just got a print with a tuxedo on it.
yeah, well, yeah. Oh. But I'm just saying, those are things that we look, as long as we look presentable. Guys tend to not dress up as much as girls do. That's just the way it is. I like to dress up. If we get an occasion where we can dress up, I like to do that. My wife likes to do that. I like to do that. Yeah, I love to see my boys all dressed up. I see my girls dressed up all the time, but I still love to see them too.
It's kind of boring after a while.
No, I mean, I just, like, when we went to that funeral, a couple months ago for Jamie,
Mm-hmm.
they said, come casual, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And Matt and Courtney showed up in,
and they were dressed up.
nice suit
Yep.
and beautiful dress, and
Yep.
I was just so proud of them to
Yep.
see them come in like that.
That's how you respect someone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So, think about it, really. God is probably He is the most important person that you should be dressing up for, that you should be walking for, living for, right? Working for. It says too, that when we're working, work is unto the Lord, Even if we're a slave, at that time of slave, we should work as if we're working unto the Lord, not worry about the slavery aspect or that stuff, but we should be glorifying God in all that we do.
Choose God and the rest will follow.
Well, choose God, yeah. The rest will follow as long as we're continuing to follow Him. There are times where we get, things get in the way and we tend to get off course sometimes. Willing to bring us back on, right? Mm-hmm. Seek ye first. Yep. Not all the things we want, all the things that He knows we need. Yep. Written in the Bible.
Same thing with He will give us the desires of our heart. He's giving us the things we desire. He's giving us things to desire.
Right. Yeah. To desire, not giving us the desires of our heart, but the right things that we should be desiring. Yeah. Was so read in the Psalms and stuff. Change my heart, O God. Different things like that talk about that, because our hearts are polluted. Our minds are polluted, and so they need to be changed. That's what even the apostles were talking about, is the renewing of our mind. It's not talking about anything other than God renewing our mind for the things that are important for Him. They become important for us then, right? And it's a walk, it's a struggle, but God is there. And are we going to be successful all the time? No. I'm sorry to say it. This isn't peaches and cream and whatever life we live when we become a believer and stuff like that. It's
It's not a cream puff.
not a cream puff, no. It would be nice, but there's going to be struggles, because it says He teaches us through those things we struggle with, and the big thing too is that the adversary has stuff against us, and he likes to use those things against us, and we've got to really think about it and come against those things that the adversary has against us. And it could be family line curses, things that we didn't do, but they've been passed down, which is interesting, having to do with DNA, right? I mean, before they knew about DNA, they didn't really understand how certain things could get passed down, right? Until they understood DNA. And God, of course, is the creator of DNA. And that's how our sin nature is passed down, Really, it's because of the DNA. When Adam and Eve sinned against God, they changed. Not only did they lose their clothing, which was the glory of God, but they were naked. They didn't realize it before. Why? Because it wasn't something that their DNA didn't process it, because it wasn't part of that. And what's interesting is that in the time to come, when we enter the world to come after the 1,000-year reign of Yeshua, the Messiah, that's the 8th day, then we will be changed. We will be changed. Our DNA will no longer have sin nature, but we'll have righteous nature. And our love for God is going to be so much we don't even understand it right now. Our desires are things we don't even we can't comprehend this stuff, you know. Even the prophets, when they seen things in the future, they could only describe them in things that they understood, terms that they understood, you know. And, you know, I don't know what things are going to be like, but I know they're going to be more than what my brain could comprehend right now. Yes.
You're talking about like before Adam and Eve, they didn't. There's a tribe in Africa. It's called the Namibia. Wear clothes. Sort of.
Yeah.
They don't wear shirts. They don't wear stuff at the top. They have
Yeah.
stuff at the bottom.
Yeah. I know.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I'm just saying.
I have
Yep.
a question I'm sure other people are wondering too. You were talking at the beginning about how wants us to be compassionate to our animals, the ones that we
Mhm.
for all animals, but when we slaughter them to show compassion and stuff like that, and yet what we read in scripture they showed, you know, stonings, people getting stoned, people getting burned to death. Can you speak to that aspect?
Murder is horrible, and yeah, I was going to talk about that too because it talks about you know, repaying foot for foot, eye for eye, that type of stuff. But God has set those because murder, in essence, when we talk about the what's called 10 Commandments or the 10 utterances, you shall not murder, right? And that goes back to which one is it? Oh, I think it's commandment number 2. Not to have any idols. See that what it is? No, number 1. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery. And you are not to murder. Why? Because we're made in the image of God. Okay? And so when we murder, we're violating that utterance, I am the Lord your God. Because we are created in God's image. And so because of that, and because of that, and that we have been given a higher soul, a neshama, which is where we get our intelligence and our being, our understanding of things, and our knowledge of things to come, or whatever, you know. We know that we're going to die someday, right? And we know that how our life is precious to us. You know, well, our lives are precious to God too, and being in the image of God, we're destroying that image when we murder. And so what can only be done is for that person to lose their life too. And stoning, yeah, stoning is kind of a hard thing to comprehend, but it's a justice because you caused that person harm, you know, and destroyed God's image, and so you too need to be destroyed in a similar fashion. And it's designed for people to see and go, oh, I don't want to do that. That's, you know, it's like, you know, well, do unto others as you would as you'd want them to do to you. Do to others as you want them to do to you, right? Yeah, and that's important because, you know, we love ourselves, so we want other people to like us, right?
I believe it's important to understand the circumstances that were outlined in the reading. For the stoning, the outline was that the man had blasphemed God.
Right. In this instance, yep.
And for the burning, that was a Kohanim's daughter who became a prostitute.
Correct. Yep. And we'll read other parts as to other things that are added to that aspect too. But yeah, you have stoning and you have burning, because she, in essence, caused caused her dad's reputation, her father's reputation, to be ruined because she was a prostitute. And he's a priest, right? And that's the thing too, is that when it comes right down to it, um, the adversary and all those who follow him, as it says, that in the end, just be at the final judgment before they enter into the age to come, the world to come, that fire will come from within them, consume them, and they shall become ash and cease to exist. And so that's one of the things that has to do with fire. Remember, God's reputation, is very important to him, right? So when it's talking about not using God's name in vain, he's talking about his reputation. Don't take his reputation and drag it through blood. His reputation is very important. It's holy. It's sacred, And when we do that, we already know there's other people who have done that. David did that with Bathsheba, where he committed adultery. Then he committed murder. He should have died for both those crimes. But Bathsheba was pregnant with his son. And so what God said, when Nathan came and told him and confronted him about it, and said that because of that, your son will die. Okay? And it brought reality to David, and he repented and he sackcloth, but it was, and God said, and when God told Nathan told David, the reason is because you caused my name to stink in front of my enemies. You caused my reputation to be dragged through the mud. So this will happen, right? But also God gave us a picture there too, because David's son died in his place. His next son was who? Solomon, Shlomo, right? From the word peace. He was the Prince of Peace. He was the King of Peace. He had no wars or anything during his time of reign, right? So, yeah, we're not talking about that. That's a different story. Yeah, exactly. But that is, see, if David didn't repent, if he didn't feel remorse for what he had done too, that wouldn't have happened either. Just like when Moses struck the first rock for water, it was a picture of the suffering Messiah, right? And the second time he was supposed to talk to the rock, right? Which was a picture of the Messiah in the kingdom. No longer suffering, but he kind of wrecked that in that aspect, right? And so he too kind of wrecked God's reputation. And so he was not allowed to go into, him and Aaron were no longer to go into the land of Israel, right? The promised land. And we see others. There's Ananias and Sapphira, that, they could have kept the money. They didn't need to lie about it, right? But they did, and because of it, they were taking God's reputation into the mud, and so they died, So God is serious about his reputation, and we should be too. Even in Proverbs, Solomon talks about that how important our reputation should be, A good reputation is worth more than gold or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it's very important, and we should have that too. With a bad reputation, Yeah, sometimes you never can, even though you've done what you possibly can. God knows, and if you've repented and you've tried to change and stuff like that, then there we are. But yeah.
Going back to DNA, when Jesus suffered and died on that cross, and we all say the blood of Jesus be upon us, would that be the same as saying that we now have his DNA? Because
we don't right now, no.
Asked for his blood.
Yeah, it was a covering. That's what it was. Yeah, just a covering. It's a symbolic covering. Right. Just like the blood of the animals were symbolic. They didn't take anything away. They just symbolically covered it in that way. Yep. Yep, as a symbolism of being covered by the blood. Yep. Yes. So anyways, so then it goes through, we talked about the festivals and stuff, but anyways, what we need to understand is that, you know, God, you know, why is the book of Leviticus in here if it's just for the priests? Because it's help us understand how God wants the priesthood, wants the Levites, wants Israel, wants us to be as well. The reason why Jewish people during the time of the temple started wearing kippahs, actually it was during their time in Babylon that they began to wear kippahs or head coverings. Okay, is because they were taught that we don't have a temple now, so the head of the household is like the priest of God to his family, and so it became part of our tradition to wear a head covering to show our devotion to God, and to show that our household is a household devoted to God. The mezuzah, the little boxes we see on our doors and stuff, mezuzah means doorpost. But we've taken it because God said to his Torah, our doorposts, right? Well, you can't write the whole Torah on a door. Sorry, you just can't. So symbolically, we take that and put those commandments in there in a parchment, which is actually the mezuzah itself, which is what it's supposed to be, scribed. And then we have a box we put in to protect it, and we put on the door. Yeah, it's just the scriptures that talk about the commandment to do that. Yep. Yep. I know.
Yeah, not the whole scripture, just the verses that talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the whole Torah, right? So, yeah. So, you know, and so those are things that are important to God because it shows when you see that on a house, you know, oh, there's a person who is whose household worships God, you know, because a non-religious person is not going to have that on their house, you know.
They don't even notice it on there, but we've had a couple people that have noticed it
Yeah.
on ours. You know.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called.
Mezuzah.
Yeah, mezuzah. Okay. I was about to say it's not mezuzah, is it?
Yeah.
No, that was it.
So, yeah, and those are things that distinguish because God is calling us to be holy, which means to be separate from the world. He's given us a diet separate from the world. Be pure with Him, right? Draw close to Him. He's given us a way how to wear our clothing, you know. Men are to wear the tzitzit, you know. And in a sense, because of tradition, we wear, you know, which is interesting too, is that in the medieval times, the church would require Jewish men to wear a yellow hat to distinguish them from Christians. You know, that's where the yellow star in Nazi Germany came from. So the Star of David, the yellow star.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And even the Muslims took that yellow tutu that Jews in their land had to wear, like a yellow belt or something like that. I can't remember, something that distinguished that they weren't Muslim, that they were Jewish, you know. So it was set apart, right? And of course with Judaism, we've taken something that was meant for bad and we've turned it into something good, you know. And that's what we have, you know. Even like the Star of David really wasn't meant for good. It was just to single us out as to who we are, you know. In the old days, and we just took it. Now it's part of our national flag, you know. So, and that's how menorah was the sign of Israel, and it still is today. But the Star of David is another one because it's became associated with Jews for so long. Yep. Right. But it's God. God takes us who weren't good, and He changes us and uses us for good, you know. And that's what Israel does. That's what Israel has done. Because why? Because they're in the image of God. They're God's people, and that's what they're going to do. You know, and so we need to look at that too as we're walking. You know, think about these things. You know, it's important in our walk that, you know, God wants us to dress up. He is in our presence at all the time. So we should really be careful what we think, what we say, what we're doing. Right. And people are watching us. Remember I told you last week, I'm a people watcher. I like to watch people just to see what people do. And or what they're wearing, or, you know, especially like some people have these necklaces and they got weird stuff on them, you know. But I seen somebody over at Walmart one time that had a necklace with a chai on it, a chaf and yod, which means life. And I was going to talk to him, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him and find out about it. But I mean, I just like to watch them, and people watch us too, because people are looking for what's real. People are looking for what's real. This last 4 years, and even the time during Obama, um, people seen that there was a lot of fakeness going around, especially with the wokeness and all these different things. People are realizing that's not it, and so we're starting to see a surge of young people becoming religious. You know, more respect, starting to go to churches.
I mean, that's mostly just because they were persecuted for that whole time. You know, if you're white and straight, you're the antichrist.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about they're talking about not just white people, but black people, natives, other people, colors or whatever, are becoming and going to churches and stuff. Even the Catholic Church is now having a surge of young people. You know, they were just talking about that. It's not just the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is growing faster than the other ones, in that sense, with that surge of young people. But other churches and organizations and synagogues are even having that too. Young people, they want to know God. They want to know the truth. And people watch us. You know, and if we're not walking in the way we're supposed to be, I mean, yeah, we're going to make mistakes, and people need to understand that. But our output should be righteousness to the best we can. You know, like I said, we make mistakes. God never called us to be perfect. He just said to do our best. You know, and people can understand that. I know. I hear a lot of things from people say, "Yeah, but see, you're supposed to, and you did that. I made a mistake, you know, or you said that, or whatever." You know, people make mistakes. I'm still human. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. You know, I'm was a work in progress. Right? So, all right. All right, so let's bow our heads for the priestly blessing. May the Lord bless you and protect you. Our God and God of our fathers, bless us with the threefold blessing in the Torah written by the hand of Moses, your servant, and pronounced by Aharon and his sons, the priests, your holy people, as it is said. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and grant you peace. Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Well, go in peace. Have a wonderful rest of the Shabbat. Wonderful week this week. Tuesday night is our Torah Club at 7. You can go to torahclub.org if you want to know what that is. It's Fruits of Zion, fflz.org. And you can find a club on there, and hopefully it's close by. In Minnesota, northern Minnesota, they're far apart. So we got people from hundreds of miles away even that are part of our Torah Club, but that join us on Zoom. But and then Wednesday night we have one chapter left, two more studies coming up on Wednesday at 7 with the book we're going through, Taming the Tongue by Mark Kinzer. Excellent book, very good. And then seems like winter returned. So it's going to be cool again. Went from summer to winter. Yeah, supposed to be cool all week. But pray for those in Missouri and that area down there that had those tornadoes. There's some people killed down there. Yeah. Kevin and those guys are fine. They're fine.
Facebook was advertising their rush sale for today. They said in October, but it was for today.
Yeah. Yeah.
October weather.
Yeah. So, then in June, from the 13th to the 30th, there won't be services or studies. Well, while we're down in Arkansas, we'll still do our Tuesday night because we do it on Zoom anyway. So we'll just Zoom everybody on the Tuesday nights. So there'll be a couple studies that we do there, and then we'll be back. But won't have services with the 14th and the 29th, I think it is. So
For the week of June?
yeah,
That month?
for services here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
that
what
month.
could be the 14th, the
28th. 28th. 14th and the, maybe you're right, 21st. Yeah, yeah.
We're coming
14th,
me,
21st,
Isaac,
and
Alex.
28th.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
and Alex and Isaac are gonna be heading back
Yep.
Saturday morning.
Yeah. So there'll be 3 Shabbats that we won't be here for. So just letting y'all know now.
And our
Yep.
anniversary.
Yep. Yeah. So
So how long you gonna be in Arkansas?
Right there. Down to the 30th, so from the 13th.
13th to the 30th. Yeah, we'll be back on the 30th.
Just a little over 15 days.
Yeah.
Just about 3 weeks.
Spend some time. Don't get enough time. Even when they come up, we don't get enough time. So aren't you guys staying home? I'm just kidding. Yeah, we'll be. Yeah. So, all right. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos.
What do they call it?
Have a good week.
Hibachi restaurant.